Hey guys, welcome back to the show where we discuss your psychology, your emotions, how to manage them in a healthy way so you can ultimately make the decisions you want to make with your life. Cultivate discipline. You don't cultivate discipline by waking up at 5 a.m. and going on a 10-mile run, as we say. That is discipline. If that is indeed what you want to do, how you want to live your life. It's not how I want to live my life. If I did that, that would most likely be an expression of self-hatred. But some people want to do that, and that's fine. You want to cultivate discipline. Manage your emotions to get to some plinth, some psychological plinth from which you will have more decisions, more conscious decisions at your disposal. More emotional energy to make decisions, more emotional leeway, more breathing room to make decisions you want to make, and stop making decisions that you want to stop making, which I guess leads into our topic for today, which is a side hustle. Difficulty starting a side hustle. This is an amalgamation of several questions I've received about, so this is a pretty common story. You do well in your job, you're working for some company, and you do, so you do well and you're maybe working up some corporate ladder perhaps. So you think, wait a minute, I see an opening here for a smaller, more agile, newer company to do this one thing that this big company or this industry isn't paying attention to. So you go off and you start your own company and you have a difficult time. Your idea was good, but you just have a difficult time in execution because you don't work as well. You work maybe 80-hour weeks when you were working in a corporate structure, but now that you're working on your own, you're barely making 35 hours a week, and you just have a difficult time getting motivated. So how do you bridge this gap from working for a company to working for yourself, to taking your side hustle and making it your main hustle? What is the psychological, what's the psychology behind that? How do we navigate that tricky step? Just a caveat here. I mean, this goes without saying, of course, but we're just going to talk about the psychology of doing this. If you're having a difficult time going from a corporate job to starting your own company or working for yourself, just even as an independent contractor, the problem may be one of strategy. You may not have a helpful strategy, and that may be your only issue. There's really no psychological issue here. But if you think you do have a strategy and you just have a difficult time executing, that's what we're going to talk about. And ultimately what this is, of course, is initiation. This is a work initiation, is what I talk about. This is one of my stages of adult development that I talk about, right? Separation from parents. Can you make friends in a healthy way? Can you work in a healthy way? This is where this comes in. Can you express your sexuality? Can you express emotions all in a healthy way? And can you give to the next generation in a healthy way? These are all questions. These are all not barriers, but just points of initiation we need to go through, I would argue, to live a full life. I have other videos about that on this channel. So this is work initiation. And, just to take a step back, what initiation ultimately is putting yourself in a more stressful environment, an environment that asks more of you than was previously asked. So it's stressful, and you need to cultivate your psychological resources to deal with the stress. I mean, right, that's the archetypal initiation of the young boy going out in the wilderness with a spear and killing a lion. I think that's what they did in Sparta or something like that, or some Maasai indigenous tribe in Africa. You are put in a psychological state where, in a sense, you think you're going to die, or it at least feels like death. That's the initiation. And the growth is, okay, now I have to get my psychological resources handled so I can manage this kind of stress. Because at my previous stage of development, I didn't have the resources I needed to manage this stress because there ultimately was no demand for it. So that's what initiation is. So when we're talking about work initiation, what going from working in a corporate structure to a side hustle is, I don't know if it's more stress necessarily. I mean, it's just a different kind of stress. I mean, it's more freedom, which is good, but also, I think There's probably just more stress associated with that, less security. Now you have to go and get your own health plan online. Whether you get paid that month is determined by maybe whether you get a customer or something. So I guess there is more stress in that respect, but there's more freedom. So that's what you opt for. There's more of an upside, more of a financial upside eventually. So that's what this is. This is initiation in the workspace. So it's about looking at what issues are being triggered now, what issues in your life are being triggered now that you don't have to answer for anybody else. Usually what this issue entails when guys have a difficult time going from the corporate world to doing their own thing, even if it's just independent contractor or side hustle, usually the issue is one of validation. In fact, I would say 95% of the cases of working with guys through this, it's one of validation. You're going to your previous job in a corporate structure and you thought you were doing well. Maybe you thought you liked it. Maybe you thought you liked the industry, but it turns out, what could be the case, is it turns out what you liked about it was the validation you received from doing a good job. And it wasn't about the job so much, but getting positive feedback from supposed higher ups, or, more seductively, not getting negative feedback from them. That provided this huge relief for you, which created this endorphin dopamine response that was very addicting. So when you worked a lot, it wasn't because you loved the job. It wasn't because of any conscious reason. Ultimately, what you were going for is that endorphin hit relief from not getting yelled at by your boss, who may or may not represent a father figure, right? Getting his validation, at least implicitly, and that's what you liked. And you did a good job when that was the thing that motivated you, but now you're out on your own doing your side hustle and there's not that motivation in place. So you go, okay, what I need to work on here is motivating myself, is in a sense cultivating my own sense of validation. That's the initiation, right? You're in this environment. Does that make sense? You're in an environment where you're being challenged in ways. It may not even be more stress. It may just be different kinds of stress. Because that's why I think working in a corporate structure to doing your own thing, because that's what I've done. It's just a different kind of stress, but it's not, I wouldn't say it's more or less stress. Great example. After we had our first kid, I guess I'm thinking about this because news around here is my wife's pregnant again. Going to have a kid at the end of March is the due date. Anyways, when we had our first kid, so my wife's mom came and spent like the first month with us when we first had this kid. And then my mom came after, and there was about 24 hours in there. After my wife's mom left and before my mom got here, where we were on our own. And for the first 5 minutes, there was this sense of dread. It felt like death. This is what death, it feels like I'm going to die. Thankfully, it only lasted for 5 minutes, right? Hey, I've been in therapy for about 35 million years, so I was able to handle that and work through it relatively quickly and go, okay, this is just my life now, this stress of having a child. Maybe it's the beginning of generativity. Right, so that's what I mean by initiation, and that's what it is. It's like you're outside the corporate structure. It's like, oh, it's good, it's going to be so freeing, but there's the sense of dread of, oh, I got to get customers. Well, I got to reach out to people. I got to figure out, I had this one idea, that this one way of exploiting this niche and, doing it in a good way. And, it's good and you're right about that, but there's all these other things that you really didn't consider. And it could just be the emotional weight of being on your own. So anyways, this is all a way of saying that this is about developing your own sense of validation. So how do you do that? Well, it may not have anything to do with work. Work may have been your way of getting validation. That would technically be workaholism, which I think is a term that gets thrown around a lot, but ultimately what it means, and it's used to denigrate people who just work hard and care about something, I think. But there is a proper use to it, and that is when we work to feel good enough, as opposed to feeling good enough on our own, and our work is an expression of that. So how do you develop your own sense of validation? So you work hard without succumbing to workaholism. Well, the first thing I would do, if you're having a difficult time and going from corporate to working on your own, chances are it's this validation issue. Chances are you like getting validation from certain people. That's what motivated you. Is I would look at other relationships in your life. Where are you, especially your close relationships, where are you still, how do I say this? Where are you still going after validation from other people in your life, personal relationships, especially, as I indicated earlier, especially your relationship with your father, maybe mother, just anybody in your life, aside from your boss in your workplace that represented an authority figure for you. Where are you still trying to get validated from your father? Where are you hiding things to not upset your father? I would look and I would get really clear about those instances and just develop healthy relationships in general, what I mean by that is in the context of workaholism and validation is, where do you hide from others, or where do you seek validation from others, or seek appeasement for others at the expense of your own self, at the expense of what you want and your own perhaps emotional expression, healthy emotional expression. And also, this may be uncomfortable and it may seem like it set you back, but it may help to consider, what do you even want in life? Often, I think this is a difficult question for a lot of people to answer, a lot of young men to answer, that they're so bent on figuring out, what do I want with my life? But they don't have their relationship squared away. Right? They're trying to figure out what they want in life, yet they're still at the same time trying to get validation from their parents. Well, that's going to be very difficult, because in order to know what you want, you have to know who you are. And until you separate from your parents in a healthy way, psychologically separate by creating a connection with them, a healthier connection with them, it's going to be very difficult to realize what you want. Do I want that thing because it's going to make me look cool, because it's going to compensate for this validation issue I have with my father? Do I want that thing because I really want it, or I have these anxiety issues that keep coming up, anxiety issues that ultimately stem from my relationship with my mother that keep me from doing that thing, right? So it just makes the process of figuring out what you want way more clear when you clear up, of course, get more diligent, audit, so to speak, your close relationships, especially with family and friends. And you may realize that this industry that you supposedly excelled in, well, you did excel in, that you got so confident in that you realized that you thought, I'm going to start my own company. You may realize that you weren't interested in that industry at all. You were just interested in getting some validation, or not receiving negative validation from people. So those are all things that I would look at if this was you, right? If this is you. The ultimate question is, why do you need to work? And that's the question of workaholism. Why do you need to work? Do you need to work to become whole, to feel like you're good enough? Or are you already, quote unquote, good enough, smart enough, and doggone it, people like you, Stuart Smalley, if you guys get that. Are you already good enough, and work is your way of expressing, like this sense of like emotional overflow, and work is your expression of that. Work is a well-refined outlet for your emotional health, right? And that's a tricky question, and well, it seems simple, but it can be tricky, because again, you can be deceiving yourself that you liked a certain industry when really what you liked is just these chemicals that you either received or didn't receive by working in a certain hierarchical structure. So that's the ultimate question: is why are you doing work? Is it to express your own sense of validation, or is it to receive validation? Now, there's a way to figure this out. It may not just be asking yourself that question. The answer to that question may not be readily obvious. So that's why we have therapy, right? Is to just get more clear about your emotional issues, how your unconscious emotional issues have affected you outside of your awareness, have informed your worldview, have informed what you think is important, without you consciously deciding. It could just be these holdover patterns from childhood that you are expressing now in adulthood, and they may have served you well when you were a child or adolescent or even a young adult, but now they're not going to serve you well because now you're at a more advanced state of receiving stress from the environment back to initiation rate. And that's what we work on in therapy, is just getting more clear about your emotional issues, how they affect you. And once we get clear about that, how to work through it, how to process these unconscious emotional issues, process just means, of course, become aware of them, the less they're going to affect you. And now when you make the decision to start a side hustle or start your own business, you're going to be more clear and more definitive on why. And that's what I would like to help you with. If you're interested, we do free consultations, animusempire.com/schedule. If you have a question for me, animus@animusempire.com. Thank you guys, and remember that the issue that you think you have with work probably has nothing to do with work at all.